All right, good evening, everybody. I just have one quick announcement before I turn it over to Deanna. All of the assignments are due by Friday, midnight Eastern Standard Time. Let me know if you need an extension. I am happy to work with everybody. And if you haven't signed in yet, there's 7 of you, not that I'm counting. Please make sure you sign in soon, okay? All right, Deanna.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome to our first Wednesday webinar. I know that we just saw each other via Zoom on Monday with a great turnout, but thank you for joining us a little bit later today than we had originally scheduled, and that's great. It actually, we might send out an email to see this time might actually work better for some of you. So I'll follow up with you there. I just do want to point out a couple of things as we go through these webinars. I just wanted to remind you, make sure that if you're not talking or asking a question that you're on mute, so it's easier, we don't get feedback, it's easier for the recording as people are watching this later. It also, it doesn't distract. A second, if you at all possible, if you can have your video on, have your video on because it really helps with our engagement. Our speakers have their videos on, and I actually kind of think about it as if you're in a Zoom classroom and everybody has their video off. It's like teaching in a classroom with everybody facing the other way. So it's just very nice to have that eye contact as much as possible. So I appreciate you having your cameras on while we're going through today. So again, welcome. I'm not going to take up too much more time. Just want to say that if you have not received your welcome packet in the mail for some reason, you should have all received those last week. If you did not receive it, I got one email. I replied to him yesterday. Please send me an email. I'll remind you of my email in the chat in just a moment. And lastly, if you're still having login issues, there's, like we've said, there's a couple people who still have not logged in. Please reach out to us so that we can get you connected. We're acting pretty fast in that area, so we'll get you connected in that way. And then lastly, before I move it to our director, Misty Stutzman, she's our Director of Entrepreneurship. I just want to, as we go through this tonight and you have questions, you can either ask them live, just shoot in the chat that you have a question you'd like to ask, or you can type your question into the chat and I can ask it for you. And so don't feel like you have to speak, but we would love it if you want to ask a question live. All right, so without further ado, I'd just like to introduce our Director of Entrepreneurship and Small Business, Misty Fox. She is been with the entrepreneurship department for over, I think, 4 years now or more. And her and I have worked together for quite a few years. So without further ado, take it over to Misty.
So thanks, Deanna. Y'all hear that she used 2 names in that. So Misty Stutzman Fox, Misty Fox, Misty Stutzman. I answer to all of them. Newlywed problems, I guess. But with that said, I, have had a lot of good advice over the years that I've worked at IVMF, one of which is be brief, be brilliant, and then be gone. So I will be brief and then maybe brilliant. Then I will be lurking on for the rest of the class, so not quite gone. But I do just want to say welcome to the second Spark cohort. Thanks to all of you for joining us in this entrepreneurial endeavor to make sure that we can still continue to meet you all where you're at on your journey. And we really do appreciate and welcome you into the IVMF family. So as you all continue throughout your entrepreneurship career, we hope that you will continue to leverage all of the resources and the family that IVMF has curated over the years. And then if entrepreneurship's not exactly what you're going to do right after this, then we hope that you look into some of the other pillars, including onward opportunity and things that we also have for y'all. So like I said, you have some great tour guides and people throughout these 6 weeks. I know Sandra and Deanna have worked very hard and put together an awesome program for you, and folks have had some great things to say as we continue to go forward and serve you all. So with that, the main attraction, the real brilliance of tonight, we're going to have Dr. Haynie that will be presenting. I know he gets antsy if I go on with an intro, so we're not going to do that. So he's our Vice Chancellor, our Executive Director, our founder, an Air Force veteran, and someone that I think will have a lot of great, valuable nuggets to share with y'all tonight. So with that, I'll pass it over to Dr. Haynie.
Um, hey everybody, I'm thrilled. Can everybody hear me? Give me a nod if everybody can hear me. So I am thrilled to be here. You know, so Misty knows I don't like the big introduction, but in the context of what we're going to talk about tonight, she probably forgot the most important descriptor of me. I am. It's true. I was a former Air Force officer. I had one of those good deals where the Air Force, while I was on active duty, sent me off to a civilian university for 3 years to pursue my PhD in entrepreneurship and innovation. And then I taught at the Air Force Academy for a bunch of years and fell in love with teaching and being an entrepreneurship professor. So I got out in 2006 and came to Syracuse University as an entrepreneurship professor. So that one fact right there is probably the most relevant, given why you guys are here and what your aspirations are as a business owner today or as a business owner in the future. So normally we the EBV program was something that I created shortly after I got out of the Air Force back in 2006, 2007, and it was a way for me to leverage sort of two identities, one as an entrepreneurship professor, and the other one as a veteran, to stay connected to the, what at the time was the only professional and personal, if you will, community that I ever had. And it was just going to be a little summer hobby, and it turned into a much bigger deal over time. And normally we would all be gathered together on the campus of Syracuse University or on the campus of UCLA or Texas A&M or Florida State or any of the schools that are part of our consortium of schools that run the EBV program. But COVID threw a wrinkle into the mix, and this Spark program was born. It is a shame because this year would have been a special year if you look at my background. So that is the auditorium in the new National Veterans Resource Center at Syracuse University. It has never held a single event because we were scheduled to open that building and welcome it to the world on April 17th, and our university shut down because of COVID 2 weeks before. It's fitting that it's empty because it's been empty consistently. But normally we'd be in that auditorium having this conversation, but we're going to make do, and we're going to have it this way. So what I was told to talk about, in addition to a little sort of background, et cetera, was this idea of opportunity recognition. And what I realized the last time I did this was what worked out best was maybe a little less talking from me and a little more talking from you and talking about this topic in the context of answering questions. So this is what so maybe I'll tee it off, and then I'm gonna ask you guys to engage a little bit. But this topic, the reason I do it, this is what I study as an academic. I am an entrepreneurship nerd. I am passionate about business ownership because I've seen business ownership change people's lives, change communities. I believe it's one of the most empowering economic endeavors that exists today. The autonomy that business ownership confers to you, the ability to turn a passion into a business and a business into a vocation, I think is incredibly powerful. And that whole process starts with the ability to see an opportunity that you can turn into a viable, sustainable business. The idea to see and recognize how you can create value for someone, whether it's through a product or through a service, in a way that solves a problem that people need solved. I think maybe you did some readings ahead of time and watched a video, or I forget, Misty, if did this group see sort of my opportunity recognition talk? So I won't go through
Yes.
it all, but I will sort of stomp my foot on this, what I believe to be the core of this, and it's the idea of the relationship between problems and solutions. You know, for me, opportunity, and I've had a tremendous opportunity throughout, you know, the last 15 years studying successful entrepreneurs and how it is that they grow successful, sustainable businesses. And it all starts with this idea of recognizing an opportunity that maybe other people don't see in the environment to create value in such a way that people are willing to pay for that value. And for me, at its core, it all comes down to the relationship between problems and solutions. And importantly, and really one of those things where a lot of entrepreneurs trip up is that they start with the solution and try to fit it to a problem. And I would tell you that's the entirely wrong way to think about what you're trying to do. You have to start with a problem and then identify a solution to that problem that creates value for your potential customer in a way that exceeds the other opportunities available to them to solve that problem. Because if you do that, you know, one of the examples I use all the time is Starbucks, and I use Starbucks because I've always thought it was a great entrepreneurial story. I don't know if you know the founding story of Starbucks, but you know, the guy who typically gets credit for founding Starbucks, Howard Schultz, did not found Starbucks. Two other guys out in Seattle who were selling coffee beans founded Starbucks, and Howard Schultz was an appliance salesman who couldn't understand why there was this little store out in Seattle that kept ordering all of these coffee grinders. And he was in New York City as an appliance sales representative, and he flew out to Seattle because he was curious why all these coffee grinders were being ordered by this little shop out in Seattle. And it turns out he got out there and found these two guys in this store called Starbucks, and all they sold were coffee beans. And the reason that there were so many coffee grinders being ordered is they also had to sell the grinders to the people buying the beans so they can make coffee at home. And he was just fascinated by this. And he tried to convince them to, hey, why don't you actually make this coffee, sell this coffee? It wouldn't do it. And he finally convinced them to sell them the business. And the rest is history. But the point of this is that what Howard recognized was the opportunity to solve a problem, because at the time, where'd you buy coffee? People bought coffee at 7-Eleven or Wawa or it was a gas station product, right? And he recognized the opportunity to essentially create a new value proposition, a differentiated value proposition for the consumer in a way that he could charge a premium price for that product. So he wasn't competing with coffee at a gas station. He was competing in a market space that he invented. My point is, for all of you, that's what you should be searching for. You know, whether it's coffee, whether it's a service, whether it's accounting, whether it's lawn care, you're the sort of the holy grail of what you're doing is trying to create this differentiated value proposition so that you don't have to compete with people on price. You're competing with folks as a function of the value that you create, and you're more likely to win, if you will, with a strategy like that than simply competing the same way everybody else is. All of that, circle back, it's about identifying a problem that right now the status quo solution, if you will, isn't good enough. That's where you will win. And I think that at its core is what opportunity recognition is about. How do you identify a problem or frame a problem in a way that you can build this value proposition, this compelling product or service offering, and sell it to the consumer in a way that is differentiated from all the other things that exist to solve that that same problem, if you will. I could go on and on and on, but it might facilitate a better discussion if I let you guys ask some questions. So, Misty, how do we do that?
So this is Deanna. So basically, you can either submit them in the chat or you can ask them live. Just shoot a message in the chat that you have a question, and I'll go to you and I'll field all of those. But I have a starter question for you, Mike, that I think can kind of spur everything on. And that would be really, and you kind of touched on it briefly, but you know, statistically, veterans have a higher success rate as compared to others, you know, when it comes to launching and growing a venture. What is your opinion on why you think that is? Is it something a veteran learns in the military? Is it something about the type of people who join? What would be your opinion on that?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And I think one day when I finally have a little time, I'm going to write a book about it, because I think the best kept secret in America is that one of the best training grounds to be a successful entrepreneur is the United States military. There's a classic definition of entrepreneurship that, you know, academics use. They describe entrepreneurship as the pursuit of opportunity in the face of inherently constrained resources. So think about that definition and now go back to your time in the military or as a military family member. You know, that's what you experienced every day. Someone gave you a task, a challenge that far and away exceeded the resources that you would otherwise need to get that done. Nobody came to you and said, hey, need you to take on this mission critical task. And oh, by the way, if you need extra people, I'll give you extra people. And if you need more money, I'll give you more money and more. No one ever said that to you. What they said is, hey, mission critical task, we got to get this done. And oh, by the way, we have 24 hours, figure out how to do it. That's what entrepreneurship is. And I truly believe that's why when you look at all of the data, you know, we know that people that served in the military are over-indexed to entrepreneurship. That is, by many, many times over, more likely to pursue business ownership than people who have not served in the military. Further, we know that the 5-year survival rate of businesses created by folks who have served in the military significantly higher than the 5-year survival rate of businesses created by people who have not served in the military. That 5 years, that's sort of like the magic number. You build a business, launch a business, and it makes it to 5 years, it's likely to make it to 20. However, across America, 4 out of 5 businesses don't make it to 5 years. But you are much more likely than your average business owner in this country to make it to 5 years, attributable to your military experience. What you learned, how do you learn to be resourceful? How you learn to be resilient? Because you're going to fail a ton. And not the big close the business failure, but you're going to have all kinds of these intermittent failures where people tell you no. People tell you they're not going to give you that loan. People tell you they're not going to buy this product. They're not going to sign that contract. And for a lot of people, that's the end. It kills them. They can't recover from those intermittent failures throughout the process. Something about our service collectively has taught us the ability to move beyond those failures in a way that we're resilient in the context of business ownership, and that matters a ton.
Thank you, Mike. We got a question from the group. I'm going to go with David's question first because it's along this same topic. And asking, along this train of thought, does it matter if the veteran served 4 years or 40, officer enlisted, or is it more the military mindset?
So Deanna, I think I saw you smile when you read this question, because you know she knows the answer that I'm going to give, and it's an answer. So I will be very honest, and for the for the officers in the room, for the colonels, if they're I've been literally teaching veterans to launch and grow businesses for 14 years. Thousands and thousands of service members have gone through this EBV program and some of our other programs, and we follow all of them. And I will tell you, far and away, some of the most more often than not, the successes that blow your mind, the ones that you say, really that they did that. They're most often young enlisted Marines, and it kills me to say that as an Air Force guy. But more generally, young enlisted men and women do this well, and our more senior officers struggle. And I think it is sometimes that this pull of the status quo that I call it. 4 years in the military, it could be that an enlistment or two, that's sort of the sweet spot. You get that entrepreneurial mindset, if you will, that ability to be resilient, et cetera, without getting sucked too much into the bureaucracy that is also true of the military. We do tend to find, we've had young enlisted men and women come through this program and build quite literally multi-million-dollar businesses. If you look at the research, there's actually very little correlation. People that do what I do, we try to figure out what makes for a successful entrepreneur. Would it surprise you? Maybe it won't, for me to say, hey, there's actually no correlation in 30 years of entrepreneurship research, for example, between education level and success as an entrepreneur. You're as likely to be successful as an entrepreneur with a high school degree than you are with a PhD. No, there's no correlation. Now there is a correlation maybe between the relationships, the networks, the social capital that you might get from a higher education experience, for example. But in terms of what you learn, no correlation whatsoever. Family history, no correlation whatsoever. But this idea of being willing to sort of take a risk and not be brought down by these intermittent failures that I talked about. Our young enlisted men and women coming out of the military seem to do that really, really well, and the data bears it out.
Thank you, Mike. The questions are flooding in, so this is great. I'm going to go to Jack. Jack has a question that he posted in the chat, but I'm going to ask him if he might want to ask that question live. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, let me hear some voices. That'd be good.
Sure. Hey, Mike, it's Jack Sherrick out in San Diego.
Hey, Jack.
So, when you're watching the pre-videos in preparation for tonight's meeting, one of the things that you talked about was, Starbucks relationship to Dunkin' Donuts, yeah, and the value that each of those bring. And one of the things that you talk about is that Starbucks, while, potentially serving the exact same cup of coffee Dunkin' Donuts is, the value that they're bringing is experience. Mm-hmm. But you also talk about, how there can be bad opportunities. Like you mentioned the dogs that sold for $1.2 million and then, petered out to where, there's shelters for them now. I mean, when you're looking at business opportunities, how are you really kind of being able to decide, is this really a fad or is this a true value proposition that I'm bringing to solve a problem in the marketplace?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good and insightful question. And what it speaks to, one is the importance of market research, understanding your customer, doing the due diligence required to maybe recognize what could be some red flags that could tip you off to, hey, this is a flash in the pan, as opposed to a sustainable opportunity. But I will also take this a different direction and tell you, And I saw our IBMF chief operating officer somewhere is here. I saw Maureen's face, but Deanna and Misty know that I beat this drum all the time, even in our own organization. One of the ways that you can create immunity for your business from a fad is to be constantly innovating. You know, the idea that, you know, it's the idea of never being satisfied, if you will, with, because single product or service businesses are dangerous. Because to the point of the question, essentially it's sort of like a mutual fund. Everybody understands a business can be like a mutual fund. You know, if you understand how a mutual fund works, it's the difference between buying a share of an individual stock versus buying, when you buy a share of a mutual fund, you're essentially buying part of a share of a whole bunch of individual stocks. In a way, that's how you should think about your business. The extent to which you can diversify your revenue so that you have multiple differentiated products or service. It could be a good way to think about it is, you know, let's say you're selling shoes. You can sell one pair of shoes, one kind of shoe, and you know, it could be a very special shoe and a very popular shoe. But think about the business that's selling 10 different kinds of shoes, and turns out your I don't know where I'm going with this shoe thing, but your shoe becomes the fad, right? And when that fad is over, so is your business. Whereas the other guy who might be selling that shoe plus 9 other brands of shoes or 9 other pair of shoes, when that fad is over, he might stop selling that shoe, but he has revenue, or she has revenue coming in from other products or services. You know, so really the way, because none of us have a crystal ball necessarily to say, hey, this is going to be a fad, this isn't going to last. Hey, why not jump in there and generate some revenue from that fad, but don't do it in a way where your entire business is based on what could be a very transactional business life cycle, if you know what I mean.
I do. So Mike, I had a quick follow on to that, if I can add it. You talked about, I guess, kind of broadening your product.
Yep.
Like, how do you balance that against brand drift?
Well, so there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways to sort of create this differentiated portfolio of products. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a different product. I'll give you an example that I'm dealing with right now that my team. So in addition to my normal job at Syracuse, for the last 5 months, I've been leading the university's response to COVID. So I am sort of all COVID all the time for the last few months. And one of the things I just did was negotiate a big contract for the university for test kits, COVID test kits, at-home kits that we can send out to students so that we can have them tested before they come back. 22,000 kids coming back to our university in 10 days. That's like a COVID nightmare, right? So we want them all tested before they come back. Well, this company that we're using is a commercial at-home. They sell all kinds of at-home kits, but the way they differentiate their product and therefore charge differential revenue, there's one test for COVID, right? The science isn't any different, but they have 5 versions of that same test. One of those versions is a kit that they would ship to me, and we would have to turn around and ship them out all to our students and put the system up to track all those results, blah, blah, blah. And that's the lowest price. And then the next option for me is that same kit, but they would do the shipping instead of mine. So we would just give them names, addresses, they would ship. But guess what? They're going to charge 20% more for that. And then there's another level, same kit, same core product, but now they're going to do shipping. They're going to do all the data management for us too. They're going to do all the, so there's lots of ways to stay within sort of a brand lane, but differentiate it. And at its core, the product isn't any different. All we've done is bundled it together with some different service levels and some, so there's a lot of slick, creative ways. But if you think about it, it goes back to where I started. Guess which one of those I bought, by the way? I bought the most expensive one because I don't want to have to do any of that, right? We don't have time for that right now. So, the value, they solved a problem for me that goes beyond just testing for COVID. They solved the data management problem for me. They solved the logistics problem for me, all with one core product that isn't any different than any of the other products that they sell, other than they bundled some additional services together with it. What else we got?
All right,
Thank you.
so we had, I'm sorry, yeah, thanks, Jack. They are flooding in right now, so this is perfect. So I'm keeping track of all your questions and we will get to as many as we can. For some reason, we don't get to all of them. I can always send an email to Mike with a couple of those questions to get his answers in time. So let me go to Marlene. Marlene had a question on, sorry, here he goes. What is the best business practice to approach a corporation to possibly set up negotiations for services?
So that's a good question. It's a tough question. I'll start with this. Relationships matter, and my recommendation over the years to veterans and non-veterans who are trying to get a business off the ground and looking to do business with another large company is to start by not asking the business question. To start with, spend some time on LinkedIn and see if you can find a senior leader at one of those companies that represents maybe yourself in a lot of ways. And I don't know the right words here, but is there somebody in that company that you could see yourself asking to be a mentor, to be a teacher, etc.? Reach out to them, try to build a relationship. And this, on the surface, this might seem to be a sneaky way in the door. I don't mean it to be that at all. Truth be told, large companies are often reluctant to do business with small startups. It takes some time, it takes some relationship building, it takes some trust building, particularly because large companies typically have standalone procurement departments. Truth be told, I was an Air Force contracting officer. So this is sort of what I did for the United States Air Force was negotiate and award contracts. And I can tell you, in that role as an Air Force contracting officer, I was very careful about doing business with small startups, because if my contract went bad, it was on me, right? So it takes a while to build up some trust, build up some relationships. So I would, if the company that you're targeting holds procurement fairs for small businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran, whatever it is, try to get in that door. So if there are set-aside programs, many companies do have set-aside programs for veteran-owned business, women-owned business. Don't have a chip on your shoulder that, hey, I don't want to have to go through that route. Business ownership's hard enough. You need every advantage that you can find. But my recommendation back where I started, I would ask for mentorship. I would ask for advice. I would ask for counsel before I ask for a contract. Build a relationship with the right people, and get to a point that you're not competing for it. They're offering you the opportunity because they want to help grow and develop your business.
Great, thank you so much. Clark Weaver, would you mind asking your question live? I just want to make sure that it's coming across the way it should.
Sure, thanks. Hi, it's Clark, coming
Clark.
to you from Honolulu. And we have I'm looking at a target opportunity, but I can't get there from where I'm at right now. So I have some other entrepreneurial opportunity I'm looking at and going for that, and then using that experience and some of that capital to take on the dream or that mission. What do you think about that as far as, basically scaffolding to your point versus starting out, you got a great idea and you go for it. Start out, you got that great idea, but you don't have the resources or the network or a lot of those things to get there, but you do have the resources, network, ability to do well in some other thing that may not be your dream or may not be what you want to do for a long period of time, but it'll make a difference and help get you started in the right.
Yeah. So I'll say you're doing it right. The idea that that term you use, scaffolding, it's also sort of a bootstrapping is another term that I could apply to what you just described. Too often people actually get out over their skis a little bit and take on too much debt, take on partners that they shouldn't necessarily take on just because they want to pursue that big dream venture right from the get-go. It might take you some time to get there. It might be not necessarily the direct route, but what you just described makes a lot of sense. It's a common approach. I think you're thinking about it in exactly the right way.
Thank you for both Clark and Mike for that one. Moving down the line, we have a question from Heather. Heather is wondering, can you be successful even if you're not marketing or sales savvy? What is your suggestion on if that's not a strength?
Yeah, so remember I told you about all the research, what makes for successful entrepreneurs? One of the things that I left out is that the stereotype is entrepreneurs are these extroverts, these people. It's not true at all. There again, in the research, no correlation between personality type and success as an entrepreneur. Now, what it does mean for you is that recognizing where know thyself is important. Because if you're not, for example, and you're not the salesperson, the sort of the in your face people person that's going to bring in customers, etc. That's fine, but it does mean that you probably need to find that person and bring that person on your team. So I am in spite of the fact that I'm a teacher, etc. I'm a huge introvert. I'm the person that left to my own devices is in the corner at a party, not talking to anybody. I am not the sales guy, but I have people on my team who are very good at that. And sort of the how that has evolved and developed is, I tell stories. I go out and sort of evangelize the value proposition, if you will. Tell the story of, for our institute, for example, what we're trying to accomplish, why it matters, why it has an impact on people's lives, on families, etc. But I'm horrible at asking for money, and that's how the IBMF stays afloat, because everything we do is free, which means I have to have people just that are basically our version of salespeople are fundraising folks. I'm horrible at it. But I can tell a good story, but I can't ask anybody for anything because I just fumble and fall down. So I have people that come in sort of behind my storytelling, and are the ones that sort of build that relationship out such that, we have people that support our work. And I recognize that about myself a long time ago. It was not a new insight. I've been that way all my life. And I've realized I have to have people around me who have this, that can complement where I'm strong and supplement where I'm weak. And I think that's the way you should think about it in the context of growing your venture.
Thanks, Mike. Wanted to share a quote that Daniel shared, and then he has a follow-up question from Colonel David Hackworth of U.S. Army Field. He's a U.S. Army Field Grade Colonel. I think this goes true along the lines of working with limited resources. We, the unwilling, have done so much with so little for so long that we are now capable of doing anything with nothing.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Pretty resonated. I'm going to take that quote, put it in my back pocket, probably put it on my monitor as well, Daniel. Thanks for sharing that. He also has a question. I'm going to go to that one, and then I'll go back up to Don, will be next. When we're talking about marketing each service, should you market each service as one or all together, or do you separate them and try to measure each of them?
I'm not sure I have context for the question. When you say each service, can you give me a little more what you mean?
Daniel, are you there? You can unmute yourself. All right, we can move on to the next one, and then we'll come back to him. I'll message him privately and see if we can get more context. So if you want to put more context, just put it in the chat and we'll come right back to yours. I'll be monitoring that. All right, moving on to Don's. What's your perspective on, and we're kind of moving into COVID. We've got a couple COVID questions here. So what's your perspective
Looks like
on,
Daniel just popped back on and
Oh, great.
unmuted.
Daniel, go
Oh,
ahead.
wait,
You wanna,
Daniel, I see
no?
you talking, but we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Let's see if your audio. Oh, no.
It's all right. That's what happens when we do virtual. There's always hiccups, but that's okay. We can adapt and overcome here. Daniel, why don't you just take some time and just, if you want to put it in the chat or message me privately with it, and I can kind of pre-explain. We'll make sure we get back to that question. I promise we will. Just for sake of time, we'll move on until we can get that worked out. So moving on to Don's question, what's your perspective on available funding for startup businesses during and post-COVID? He stated it's already challenging to borrow pre-COVID.
Yeah, so it's, I think it's going to be rough. I think it's going to be a rough couple of years. Now that said, if you look at all of the, go back 20, 30 years, all of the periods of economic recession and depression over the last 20 years, the first community out of those economic hard times has been small and medium-sized business, and so there is a silver lining here, and the silver lining in part is it keeps going back to what I started with: problems and solutions. There are a lot of people facing real challenges as a consequence of COVID when combined with the economic downturn. That can present an opportunity for small businesses who can identify compelling solutions to some of the challenges that people are facing today. COVID has created an interesting dynamic with regard to geography. I'm not sure. Somebody's trying to grasp something going on there.
think Daniel may have figured out his audio.
No, I muted him. I'm not
Oh,
sure where
okay.
that's coming from.
You know,
There we
so
go. Sorry
um,
about that.
so people aren't traveling right now. So there's a lot more people buying locally, shopping regionally. So depending on the type of business, you know, that if you do have a local or regional draw, COVID actually could be good for you. You know, there was an interesting article. Fair amount of people bought cars during COVID, and the average distance that someone pre-COVID, people would car shop up to 500 miles. If they didn't buy a car online, they would car shop up to 500 miles, typically from where they live, to find the best deal. During COVID, that radius shrank to 50 miles. And it's because people are, you know, sort of their economic world has gotten much, much smaller. So there are some opportunities. But I do think from an access to capital perspective, lending, it's gonna be tough for a little while. And you know, I think it's why, you know, small business failures, the rate has gone up, I think, each of the last 4 months in the data. So I just think it's going to be tough. Nobody has a crystal ball. The faster we get through this, the faster that people get back to traveling, to retail, the better we're all going to be. But I don't have a crystal ball.
So we have clarification on Daniel's question, and what he's meaning by services is really if you offer 10 services as part of your business, do you market each one individually, or do you market all 10 at once? How can you measure which works best with your marketing?
So it's sort of, you know, it's the difference between a house of brands and a branded house. And it, you know, at the IBMF, we've been having this conversation for 3 years. You know, we started out, before there was an institute, there were a bunch of individual programs that all had their own brand, et cetera. And then we created an institute. We realized that all of our little individual programs have better brand recognition as individual programs than the larger institute does. It's the, you know, this is the famous example here is Procter & Gamble, right? Procter & Gamble, Fortune 50 company, that's Tide, that's Crest toothpaste, that's you know those brands better than you know Procter & Gamble. Most people don't even know that those products are Procter & Gamble products, because their strategy, to your question, is not to market the individual products they sell under the umbrella of a single brand or company brand, but to create their own marketing program for each one of those. The other side of that coin is a branded house, where the brand that you market is the umbrella that underneath that umbrella are all of these individual products and services, but your focus is not bringing consumers necessarily directly to the individual products and services, but bringing them to the house. And when they open the door, then they have access to all of these products and services. You know, what's the right one? There is no definitive answer where it makes the most sense. It really is a strategic decision with regard to, you know, whether or not you're trying to create a long-term strategy where you're gonna continue to sort of diversify and sell what might be an otherwise disconnected set of products or services. If that's the case, then it might make more sense that you're trying to build individual brands for those individual products and services. But if what you're selling is a set of products or services that are variations on a theme, if you will, that are it's like Zappos, right? Zappos is a good example. Shoes started with shoes. They sell other stuff now, right? But the brand they lots and lots of shoes. They're all different, but they're not trying to. Their strategy was not to build a brand for each of the product lines, but to build a brand that will draw people into Zappos as the house, and then access what are otherwise a bunch of related products. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way I would think about it, as a function of how related or not those various service lines that you're talking about are. That would really drive whether or not you build individual brands for them, or work on building the umbrella brand for everything that you're offering.
Great. Moving on, we're getting through some of these. So Mike has a question for Mike, and he actually has a couple questions, and I'm going to try to combine a couple of them here. And number one, I think I could answer this as well, and I think I know what you're going to say, Dr. Haynie. But how many hours a day do you work on average as an entrepreneur if you also have a full-time job? What's a good balance there? And then second to that is really how do you generate new ideas? And you touched on it a little bit earlier. And how do you define success? So all combined there.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, I'm the worst person. The right answer to the first question is, oh, you got to find some balance and blah. So I haven't eaten yet today. I was up at 4 a.m. I have yet to eat. I was on an hour-and-a-half Zoom right before this Zoom with 1,200 parents, trying to convince them that we're going to create a safe camp. I have zero balance, is my point. I haven't figured out how to do it. I think you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. This is where they struggle. It's not healthy. I can make jokes about it. We can laugh about it. There's a growing academic research, believe it or not, in entrepreneurship about mental health challenges, that entrepreneurs have higher divorce rates. Entrepreneurs have higher instances of mental health issues, largely because they haven't figured out this balance thing. So how many hours a day? I'm the last person that should be giving you that advice. But I maybe how I answer it by say, be healthy and remember all the other things in your life that should matter. Is maybe the best way to answer that question. What was the other question, Deanna?
So how do you generate new ideas, and how do you define success in that?
Well, I'll tell you how I used to generate new ideas. I used to read a lot, and not read novels, etc. But I always found just newspapers, news websites, etc. Because for me, I'm always looking for problems to solve, and a great place to find problems is just to watch the news. It could be depressing, but learning about what the human experience, what people are going through, and trying to identify opportunities to address their burdens through what you do, for me was a. I also like to talk to people. In spite of the fact that I'm an introvert, when I get an idea and I'm excited about it, I like to talk to people about it. And there is one thing about a few years back, and Deanna, Misty certainly know this. I gave a presentation that I think I've only given once because it was a little dangerous for me to give it in the first place. But it was at a big conference that we run for veteran entrepreneurs, and I'll apologize ahead of time for the title, but the title of the presentation was "Stupid Shit Veteran Entrepreneurs Do." Because over all the years of me doing this, there are a couple idiosyncratic things about veteran entrepreneurs that I've noticed that are barriers for them to be successful. One is too often we think that everybody's trying to steal our idea and we can't talk to anybody about it because it's proprietary and we don't want somebody to. I will tell you, if you're unwilling to talk about your idea with people that you trust, you're adding years to the amount of time it's going to take for you to achieve the goal or objective that you want to achieve. That feedback from people you trust is critical. That feedback from people who have been down this same path and maybe even built businesses in the same industry is critical. It might be 1 out of every 50 instances of an entrepreneur talking about their idea with somebody else. Maybe, you know, maybe somebody else does take it and run with it. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, more often than not, your willingness to talk to somebody about your idea and refine it and make it better and make all the difference in the world. And, you know, and for me, that's another way that I sort of, and I know other entrepreneurs come up with, you know, sort of this opportunity recognition process.
Like, to kind of expand on that, we have another question that just came in, and since we're on that same topic, I'd like to go to that. Matt has a question on, suppose you have many ideas that aren't necessarily related. What are some techniques that you would suggest to whittle down those ideas to 1 to 2, since resources aren't plentiful?
I got one.
Further, Matt says, further, as I intend to shut down when I have too many options, what strategies can I use to narrow the field?
So, I mean, there's lots of different ways to think about this, but I always default to one. And it's actually not based on market potential or dollars or anything like that. It's actually a much sort of more warm and fuzzy subjective metric. And it's what I'm most passionate and excited about. Because at the end of the day, I will always choose that over something that, you know, maybe it's a little more market connected, maybe it's a little further along, but I don't wake up thinking about that every day. I wake up thinking about this other thing. I'm going to choose that other thing every time, because at the end of the day, I'm more likely to give it everything I have. I'm more likely to be able to sell it because I'm excited about it. You know, it's why I think, for me, the veterans work has gotten as far as it has because I care about it. I'm excited about it. When I talk to people about it, it's authentic, it's genuine. I think my recommendation is that's how you make those decisions. You know, what is it that you're going to get up every morning excited about? You know, ready to jump in and try to take it to the next level.
Thank you very much. We have a question that was asked a little earlier in the night, and I'm getting to it now. John Carnegie, he's in real estate, and his biggest challenge is that it's hard to find great help. He's creating an umbrella of problems, but he has success. His biggest problem is that he can't maintain consistency value. Any business insight or ideas that you might have for him?
Well, so first I'll validate and maybe offer some empathy on the people part. That's the hardest part of growing a business, is building a team. And you know, you're not alone in that regard. It's where everybody struggles. You know, so it's why I default to passion often. I would much rather hire somebody, and this happens in practice all the time. You know, I lose interest very quickly looking at people's resumes. I am much more interested in having a conversation and getting a sense of how passionate they are about the work that we do. The extent to which they're going to come to work every day not necessarily thinking about what we do as a job, but more as a mission and a calling and something that they're gonna buy into 100%. If you open your aperture a little bit with regard to and you're willing to do a little training and a little mentorship, and maybe hire the person that doesn't have the perfect resume, but that you can teach and train and mentor. It's a way to at least increase the pool a little bit in terms of the challenges you face on the hiring side. And then there was a second part of that question, Deanna. Do you remember?
Yes. So the second part of the question was, his biggest problem is that he can't maintain consistency value. Are there any insider ideas there?
Well, so I think I sort of, in a way, addressed it, if I understand it, because that's a people problem. If you can't consistently deliver on the value proposition that your customer expects, most likely what is letting down is people. So that's how I would attack it. It's about building a culture around, in your case, service delivery, taking care of the customer or the constituency that you're most focused on, and delivering on that value proposition consistently, time and time again. It's always going to be about people.
Thanks so much, Mike. Renee is next in the lineup, and she's going to ask her question live. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Renee.
Good evening, Mike. My name is Renee Brunell, and I own a 2-year-old senior move management business. Pathfinders is a name named after my late husband, who was an Army Pathfinder. My question is about COVID, because our projections for this year were really doing great over the first 2 years gain. But now with the added expense of COVID, testing every 2 weeks, the PPE supplies, and all of the other things that are kind of impacting the market, is there a certain percentage of last year's year to date per month that we should be looking at a percentage of what we were making last year to say that's a pretty successful recovery for this year?
Yeah. So before I answer that, you have to give me the 90-second elevator pitch. Explain to me exactly what your business does. I heard you describe it, but now you have to give me some details.
Absolutely. So we focus mostly on older adults, where someone who's maybe been in their house for 2, 3, 4 decades, and now something's changed in their life, and they either want a carefree lifestyle, or there's been a healthcare change, and they need to move to a smaller footprint. So I have a master's in senior health, so I can take care of the health side. My business partner is an interior designer by trade, so we can also come up with a floor plan to scale. We go in, take care of all of that, decide what's going to go to their new resident, move that, unpack it, and then what's left over, we help connect them with underserved nonprofits in the area, so that there are things that they don't want and their kids don't want, can go have a new life with somebody who's maybe a little bit less fortunate, and now they will have a great opportunity to have it blessed forward.
That's interesting. So what's the economic model? How do you get paid?
Well, I get paid from a few different ways. I get paid from the senior living communities, giving me a certain volume of money to move the person from their home into that particular location. Often there's a 2-prong approach where the person has a certain cap from the community, and then we have a second revenue stream from the senior or their adult child to help us make sure the home gets emptied and ready for the real estate side of things. We also can offer light staging. Sometimes we get referrals from the attorneys due to probate or estate, and sometimes people that are senior placement counselors or geriatric care managers that have clients that need that extra bit of TLC to get them unstuck and moving forward into their new address.
I love it. That's a good business model. I like that.
If it wasn't for COVID, I would be smiling from ear to ear, but we are maintaining.
Yeah. So to your question, I think it's next to impossible for me to sort of give you a percentage of last month over month revenue that would you know, it'd be very, very hard to do. You know, all that said, part of the reason I asked the question about, give me some more details about the business, is your business, while maybe taking a short-term hit on COVID, I think your business will recover well. And what I mean by that is I think as soon as we get beyond, you know, this stage of COVID we're in now, when, you know, there's come late winter, spring, the first people that are going to get a vaccine when a vaccine is available are the elderly, immune compromised, et cetera. And then there's going to be this pent up demand for what you do, you know. So I think you're going to be more busy than you ever have been as soon as people are in a position where it's actually safe for them to move, because you have all these people now that otherwise would have made the transition that you described but can't because of COVID. They're not going into assisted living facilities. Their families won't let them, right? Because they're perceived to be unsafe. You know, so I don't think I can answer your question, but I can tell you I think you're going to recover well based on what you do.
I will say one of the nice things is, with my background, we were ahead of actually even the CDC guidelines. And so one of the nice things is that we've actually been able to really gain a larger market share. And some of the smaller businesses that were doing this in my area, I don't know if they're going to reopen post this kind of difficult time.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Renee. So we have about just under 10 minutes left. Right now, I've got 3 questions left in the lineup. That's probably going to take up our time, but if you have more questions, put them in the chat because I'll keep track of them, and we'll get them answered one way or another. We'll make sure that those get answered. So moving on to Josh Ott, you can go ahead and ask your question. Just unmute yourself.
I'll read it off because I don't remember exactly what I said. What is the best tool to reach the right person within a company to propose your product to? Telephone, email, social media, mailing, smoke signals. I'm willing to try anything at this point.
So I will tell you, I've become a big fan of LinkedIn. You know, but not a fan of using LinkedIn as a blanket kind of, you know, because a lot of folks will you know, find 10 contacts at the same company that they're trying to get into, and they'll reach out to all those 10 folks. Well, you know, it's very likely that all those 10 folks probably have offices, right? You know, okay, who's this dude that's emailing, trying to connect with all of us at the same time? Then you become a little bit of a joke inside. I would identify, again, 1 or 2 people. Do your research. You know, people that have, and try to find any connection. It doesn't have to be a professional connection, but hometown, you know, whatever it is. But I would, and here's where I'm going to get a little. I would play the veteran business owner card, looking for mentorship, help, support, that kind of thing. You know, the people do at their core want to help other human beings, right? And a humble, you know, I get tons and tons of LinkedIn requests, and the ones that I never ever respond to are the ones where first time you reach out to me, you're trying to sell me something. They're the ones that I sort of delete. Ask me for advice. Ask me to, you know, help direct you to the right place. Hey, do you know about resources that could be useful to me? I'll respond to those every time. But if I don't know you and you reach out to me cold, and the first thing you're asking me for is to sell me something, I'm probably not going to respond to you. But I am a big fan of LinkedIn. I found it a very useful tool. Calling random emails. There's another thing. I've learned the block sender function on Outlook. If again you email me coldly in from some random company that I've never done business with, and your first email is, hey, have you heard about our product that can solve your problem? I think you should, can I send you a meeting invitation? It just turns me off instantly. So I block you forever. My recommendation is to use LinkedIn. Try to find somebody that that you can potentially build a relationship. Ask for advice, ask for counsel, and see where it takes you.
Thank you so much for that question, Josh. I would say all of the above. So we go on to Richard. We've got 2 questions left. Richard will be the second to last, and then we'll finish with Jack's final question. Richard is asking, so he is still thinking about which type of business to pursue. And he says that when I decide on one and move out, family will probably want to be involved in it. What types of challenges can I expect trying to lead and manage family as employees?
I always hate when people ask this question because my sort of default advice is I've seen this go so bad so many times. You have to set really clear rules and guidelines. What's family and what's business? Because and what the priority is in the context of that. There are certainly examples in my world and more broadly of family businesses that thrive and grow. But what's interesting is where those are successes, more often than not, let's take a husband and wife. It's not always the ones that work typically are the ones where the husband and the wife are not equal partners. And I don't know a different way to say it, but sort of this, we're doing it together. It's where it's the wife's company, she's run it, and the husband's the marketing director. That seems, and it's anecdotal, it's not scientific, but those kinds of models seem to work better than when that same husband and wife are co-CEOs or sort of the co-leaders, co-owners of the business. Those don't seem to end all that well, right? Sort of it's this idea of going in and from the very beginning defining roles and where my lane is, where your lane is. If you can do that, it works. But if you can't, family business can be tough.
Thank you. And our last question, Jack, I'm going to go back to you. You can go ahead and ask your question live if you would. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, I'm going to get stuck on the branding issue. I'm just going to give you the bluff right up front. So essentially, as a startup, do you think that it's better to market as a branded house versus a house of brands? And the reason I say that, is when you talk about marketing multiple brands as independent entities, it's either A, very time consuming or very manpower intense. So I would think there would be counterintuitive to do that as a startup. Am I off base there, or?
No, I don't think you're off base at all. And I also think there is for you guys specifically, because of who you are, what your experiences were, and potentially how you're going to build this business. You are part of the brand as the founding entrepreneur, right? So it's back to this. It's back to this whole veteran piece. Being a veteran can open doors for you. Being a veteran can create opportunity for you that maybe isn't there for others. That fact, that truth, lends itself to potentially push you more towards the brand. I'm back and forth between the two. By building the brand for the house rather than the brand for the individual products, right? Because you as the founder and veteran entrepreneur are part of that brand, that really what you're trying to build is the umbrella, as opposed to the, I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, certainly either option, it is a little idiosyncratic to exactly what your products are, who your market is, what industry you're competing is. But I think generally, Jack, you're right that it's more at a startup phase. It's more likely that you're focused on building the house than building all the individual brands. It probably makes more sense from a resource perspective, because it is going to be more resource efficient to do that. It also probably makes sense, at least initially, from an awareness perspective, the extent to which you can get your name, your company's name out there in the world in a focused way, build the house rather than all the individual brands.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike. Well, everyone, we are on time, so we are going to have to close out our session. I do see that there's been 2 of you that put questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and make sure that those get answered. We'll try to get those answered either by Dr. Haynie or by someone else to get you the answers to your questions here in the next couple of days. So I'm making note of that. I also saw a few of you sent me some private messages about your login information and things like that. So please note I'll be taking care of that tonight and tomorrow morning. And so just with everything, I just wanted to thank Dr. Haynie for joining us, and Misty, as well as Maureen is here in the background. So I really just thank you all for joining us, for your time, especially Dr. Haynie for the knowledge, for just making a point to not eat and come to this class. I really, really appreciate it. The knowledge and the advice that was shared here is invaluable. So everyone, thank you for staying with us and for being with us at the later start time. If this works good for everyone, I'm going to send out an email to the class to see. It may be that a later time works for more of you, and so we'll see what works best for the majority. Just a reminder, this session is recorded, so you can go back. Sandra will post this in Blackboard, and you can go back and rewatch this, and also for those who couldn't join us tonight, they can watch it as well. And then lastly, next Wednesday evening, we'll be on the topic of value creation, and Mr. Sean Brannigan will be joining us. He joined us last cohort. He is a serial entrepreneur. He's a professor at the Newhouse School of Communications at Syracuse University. He has started and sold a lot of business and just recently launched another one as well. He's going to touch on value creation, design thinking, and he is just a great sounding board for all things entrepreneurship as well. So take a look at his bio. We'll post it up into Blackboard so you can get to know him via his bio and all that. And I will see you next week. Don't forget to turn in your homework by Friday midnight. And if you have any questions, obviously on course content, connect with Sandra. Anything else, send me an email. So again, thank you, Dr. Haynie, for joining us, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.